Hey, team players, it's local football flavor where we're going to talk today about the Chicago Bears. And Bob, this is a team that I love for fantasy and I love to bet against because I think there's going to be some really good parts for that. I do believe that Eberflus is going to be the worst coach that does not get fired at the end of the season because Chicago doesn't fire their coaches fast enough. And when we look at this, they're going to be having an abysmal season. And it all starts because the most overrated player in football, Mr. Justin Fields. Justin Fields is one of the few quarterbacks in the NFL that takes slower to process reads than Kyler Murray and is less accurate than Lamar Jackson. What do both of them have in common? They try to get away with it with their legs. Remember, when you watch this team on film for the whole first half of the year, the first 8 games, they were afraid to throw the ball downfield, and it wasn't until the Thursday night game that they actually felt like, oh, maybe we should try this. There is no confidence in Fields because he's not accurate. Pure and simple. He's not. But he does have the Lamar Jackson thing going for him, which is why I think he's going to be a very good fantasy quarterback in his second season. And I also believe that Kmet is going to be an amazing steal because he runs around. Kmet loves sitting in holes, and eventually he finds them in his big frame, especially in the red zone, those few times they get down there. Their receiving core is an absolute joke, led by Claypool as the worst of the bunch.
Whoa.
I'm talking about the jokes. You can talk about the good one later.
No.
Yes.
Claypool is not leading this.
Claypool's the worst joke they have on their team that they think is good.
He might be leading the jokes, but he's not leading the wide receiver core.
No, he's not. He's not their number 1 receiver. He's their number 2 receiver.
Okay, so he's.
But the fact that he's their number 2 receiver speaks volume.
Carry on.
Sorry, I apologize and digress. Bob, I'm missing a thing to be excited about with this team. Their defense sold itself last year. They basically didn't replace it. ESPN did their classic post-draft, let's knock up the bad teams, give their players better ratings, which if you downloaded their pre-draft rankings, which I did, and then look at them today, there's higher grades than all the Bears. They are trying to sell Chicago as a viable team. Chicago's going to have a top 5 pick next year. They're going to stay with the same old. And like every other Ohio State quarterback, they have an under 500 quarterback who will never lead them to anything prosperity, except for great fantasy numbers, especially in leagues that don't penalize hard for turnovers.
I think realistically speaking, that this team is a 5-win team, maybe a 6-win team, logistically speaking. Again, we're dogging on the NFC South a lot, and there's for very good reason, minus maybe the Saints. But we also have to think about the progression of the Chicago Bears and thinking about, okay, where is that progression happening at? What's going on with this team? Well, let's start with the defense first. You traded Roquan Smith last year. He was arguably your best player. I believe they had a defensive end too as well that was really good.
Yeah, they traded 2 away last year.
Yeah. So if you look at this team and you say, okay, you trade a talented players and you trade them to teams that are equally as talented in that same, in that same area, and you look and you say, well, what did they do this offseason? Well, they went out there and they got Edmonds. They went out and have Edwards. They also have a guy in Sanborn who, on a bad team, was a shining light at times for this organization.
Mm-hmm.
You say to yourself, okay, well, those additions are great. Did they get any better anywhere else? And I don't know how you can say they didn't because they were so bad last year that any modicum of improvement upon what they did last year.
How can you tell me that Devontae Foreman's an upgrade over Monty?
Say that again?
How can you tell me that Devontae Foreman
I'm not getting there yet.
is an upgrade over Monty?
I'm still in a defense.
My bad.
I'm saying on a defensive standpoint, logistically speaking, they can't get worse than they played last year.
True.
Now, are they going to be 4 wins better to get to 8 wins? No. But I think that a lot of what we see, I think the defense The sum of the parts on the defense are better than last year, and I think it's going to be putting them in positions to win games rather than putting them in positions to lose games. Now, I think it is the opposite for the offense. I think the offense is going to put them in positions to lose games than they will to win them. The reason I say that is because last year from Justin Fields, we saw a player who realized their talent was running, and they ran it. And they did it exceptionally well. They also realized, okay, I've got to figure out my passing game, and they couldn't do that. So they went out there and they got DJ Moore. They traded they traded their pick. They went out, they got DJ Moore. Okay. Excellent. Fantastic move. DJ Moore is a great player. But
he is, but he's going to be wasted.
The problem is Justin Fields needs to give him the ball. And we are not so confident that that action is going to happen as much as it needs to happen for the Chicago Bears to win. Likewise, Chase Claypool, he has fallen off the face of the earth, and any Steelers fan could have told you that that was most likely going to happen. But now you sit him on a team where he's the number 2 wide receiver and the quarterback barely even throws him the ball. I mean, when we looked at the numbers, Chase Claypool was the losingest player.
He was.
Out of all the teams last year, because he accumulated the losses for the Steelers and none of the wins for the Bears, but all of the losses for the Bears. He's the only player in the league to lose the most games last year by playing in all of the games. And I'm just not confident in this wide receiver core. You spoke highly of Kmet. I really like Kmet. I like what Chicago's doing with their offensive line. I think that they're doing a very good job trying to find ways to protect Justin Fields. I am not down as much as you are on Donta Foreman. I think Donta Foreman last year showcased with the Panthers.
But he's not better than Monty.
I didn't say
Monty
he was
their second best weapon last year.
I didn't say he was. But I also I'm not downing Khalil Herbert as well. Khalil Herbert showed a level of talent that when Montgomery was down, this offense has pieces to be successful. But that success hinges on Matt Eberflus as the head coach. It also hinges on Justin Fields not relying 100% on his legs, because we saw what that did.
What's he going to rely on? His inaccuracy, his slow decision making?
That's what we're getting to. That's what we're getting to. And this is the reason why Justin Fields is stopping this iteration of the Bears from being an 8 to 9 win team, is because he's
it's more than Fields. It's an inept GM and an inept coach too.
Justin Fields is not worth the same amount of wins as a guy like Lamar Jackson. No. We can peg Lamar Jackson for 7 wins, 8 wins by himself, no matter the team around.
Yeah, he's closer to Kyler Murray, which you can peg 2 losses on.
That's what I was about to say. He's worth a couple losses in and of himself because he doesn't do enough. And when you don't do enough and you've relied on that defense that was garbage last year to do everything, that was not a good combination for the Chicago Bears. And that's why you saw their win total as it was. Now with a balanced out part of the defense there, I think a realistic expectation for the Chicago Bears would be capping out at 5-6 wins. I think you can beat Oakland potentially. I think you could definitely beat the Buccaneers.
Yeah.
I think you are going to have a hard time against Atlanta. I think that maybe you beat the Saints. We'll see how Derek Carr does. And what about who's the other team I'm missing down there? The Panthers. Yeah, I think that you could beat the Panthers. And so right there, right there, you're starting off with maybe 3 wins. So can you sneak one in against a division opponent? They also play the worst schedule teams out of the other conferences as well. You know,
they're playing the AFC West. You think is there a chance they're even within 1 score of any of the AFC West teams?
Are they getting Oakland or are they getting Denver?
Well, they get both of them. They get the whole division.
Okay, but I'm talking about their wild card teams.
Oh, so they get the worst one in the West, which is the Rams, right? Or is that Arizona? Whichever, the Rams are the worst over there. They get
If
the
it's
Redskins.
the Rams, I think they don't beat them. If it's the Cardinals, I definitely think they could beat them. Let me look this up.
Whichever one came in last year. They get the Redskins in the East for sure, because they definitely came in last. And then they get the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland Brown game will be interesting. They can't stop the run to save their life, and Fields can do it.
All right, so you're looking at a season now, starting with the Packers. That could go either way depending on how Jordan Love comes out of the gate. Then the Bucks, I count that as a win.
Should be.
Lost to the Chiefs.
Obviously.
Lost to the Broncos. The Commanders game, we'll talk about the Commanders in another show. Lost to the Vikings. A potential win against the Raiders. So you're looking at right now 1, 2.
I guess, Bob, this is my biggest thing.
3,
you can go through the whole thing.
Wins.
For a team that finished in last place last year, potentially could. They had the first pick in the draft, they traded away. Even getting more, they added no splash to this team. There's no let's go get it. Yeah, granted, they drafted a tackle, and he probably is the right selection. He will be in the league. He will be solid. But there is no person where you go, we can just give the ball to him, and it'll work out.
Well, that person, they want that person to be
Fields. Can't get it to people.
But they want that person to be Fields.
But so here's my problem. We know Fields is inaccurate. The kind of receiver that works with a deep ball thrower who's not accurate is one who runs. Baltimore has shown this. You don't need to have a talented receiver. Just have a Duvernay who can return a kick and run a mile, then you chuck it to him every once in a while with a good tight end. That's not what Moore is. Moore is much more like Cooper in Chicago, or Cleveland rather. A very good technical receiver who can get in and out of breaks and has some size to him. Which is, that's what he is. But you're still throwing into a window to get to him. And he flat out doesn't do that. And he just doesn't.
That's the issue. That's the whole issue with the Chicago Bears. When we talked about each team in this division, we talked about the wild card in each division. The wild card for the Chicago Bears is the development and progression of Justin Fields. This team, like many teams with a star quarterback, go the way their quarterback goes. If they're healthy and they play, they can do exceptionally well. But the issue with Justin Fields is we haven't seen him be a quarterback in the way that we want to see him be a quarterback. He has been a rusher, and he tallied an incredible rushing total last year. But as a quarterback, we basically saw what you've seen, and it is a poor progression reads. It is poor presence. It is a lack of understanding for the game as it's developing.
Disbelief in his line as well.
As it's developing. Like, when you talk about Ohio State quarterbacks, and you mentioned why certain players like Stroud aren't successful, why Ohio State quarterbacks don't find success, it's questionable that we've seen so much talent come out of Ohio State. And when we've talked
they make the best receiver in football every year.
Well, we've also said, though, that Ohio State surrounds them with a ton of talent that they don't have to think a lot of times at a level that other players need to think. So I'm not saying these people are dumb by no stretch of the imagination.
No, they don't need to learn anticipation. It's a skill set. It's not an approach thing. It's a skill set, and they don't get taught it.
It takes time to learn those things. And now you're throwing young, talented players who do have talent, young, talented players going from an elite level team to now going to a bottom of the barrel team.
And no offensive line.
And they're given 2-3 years to figure it out, maybe even only a half. And if they don't do it, they move on to the next one and they never get another chance again. Now, Justin Fields this year, I hate to say it, and I could be wrong in saying it, but this is the make or break year for Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears. If it doesn't work, they need to move on. I mean, they really do. If they want a future for this franchise that's a winning franchise, they need to move on from Justin Fields if it doesn't smack this year. Well, that's a given whenever, you know, a quarterback and a coach are so tied together with one another. But like you said, I don't think he's going to get fired this year because I think the Bears are going to do just enough to keep him off of the hot seat for a degree. But
you went through their schedule. There's a good chance they have 10 losses in a row.
I've seen predictions where the Chicago Bears ends up with 8 wins.
Well, then they're wrong.
Or they end up going 8-9 because of those games that I mentioned. They could go either side, depending upon how Fields plays.
The only way these guys approach 8 wins is if you completely assume Green Bay can't win at all, and then they sweep Green Bay. Because the other part with this division, and it gets all 4 of these teams in trouble, is that despite what the rookie was last year, none of these teams have a pass rusher. Now that Mac has left this division, it's been for a while since Mac has left this division. They don't have a pass rusher.
Are you saying minus Hutchinson and Houston?
I'm saying counting Hutchinson. They don't have an elite pass rusher. Hutchinson, he's a rookie. He might turn into one. But they don't have someone that you go, it's 3rd and long, we're going to get sacked. And Chicago still got sacked all the time, which is the point I was trying to get to.
Here's the thing. When you go out of the division, in games out of the division, and then you start playing again, and this is the thing where Justin Fields has to be careful. When you start playing teams with elite pass rushers.
Like he's going to play Joey Bosa. How do you think that's going to work out?
That's what I'm saying. When you go to play, when you are used to being in a division that doesn't have eliteness at the position, and then you go to play teams that have elite at the position, you have now basically taught yourself, I don't need to worry about X, Y, Z. But now all of a sudden I start.
Then Myles Garrett shows up.
I have to start watching game tape on Myles Garrett, and I'm like, holy, I've got to really watch my back because I don't trust X, Y, Z. I'm just saying that the jump that Justin Fields needs to make this year as a player and as a passer, if he makes the jump, the Bears could be talking about 8 wins. If he doesn't, which is more logistically possible and statistically possible, this team maxes out at 6.
For him to make that jump, it would be one of the largest season-to-season.
Oh yeah, he would win.
NFL
he would win Player of the Year if he were to make that jump.
He'd have to, and
by far and away.
Do you expect that?
If you think he can make, if you as a fan think he can make that jump, you better be voting on him on your FanDuel account or on your DraftKings account for most improved player, because and offensive player of the year, because that would only happen if that change happens, and it would have to be recognized by the NFL, because they're not going to let their darling go like that.
I think the more interesting bet is how many games this field misses or wins. Which number is bigger?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Yeah. But the team, despite its parts, this team really does all hinge on Justin Fields' play. Because you look at who their backup is.
They don't have one.
Who?
They don't have one. I mean,
that's what I'm saying.
Let me read it to you here directly. Who? The official backup on the roster is your one and only P.J. Walker.
Who? No, I'm kidding. I like P.J. Walker, but he fell off the map in that one game last year when and he played good in one game. Who's their third? Peterman?
Yep.
I'm convinced, Joe, and I will always be convinced.
They're doing that on purpose, so there's no threat of on Fields. That's a horrible way to go.
P.J. Walker is what I think a possible outcome for Justin Fields would be.
What, in the league for 6 years as a backup?
No, well, yeah, but if things don't turn out for Justin Fields, P.J. Walker has a very similar. You know, I'm gonna make my 1 or 2 reads, and then he's not that good at it. Mm-hmm. Justin Fields is better at it, but
dude, Bob, I look at this having a failure from Carolina last year as your backup quarterback as a showing that you don't have faith if you put real competition here, that he would win out the job. And the only thing that is more pathetic than putting a failed Carolina quarterback as your backup is to put a Jets quarterback as your backup. And for some reason, those people think they're going to win the Super Bowl down south.